Hey y'all, I'm former State Representative Attica Scott here today with Stay Live Streams. We're going to be interviewing three activists, leaders, and protesters who were on the front lines for justice in 2020 and who have continued their activism as they work for a people's consent decree. They matter, their experiences are important, and their voices need to be heard. So join us today on Stay Live Streams.
My name is Summer Dickerson, and we're here to talk about the consent decree. What brought me out was that I felt like LMPD was well, obviously what they did with Breonna Taylor, and then as far as being the protest, they just the things they weren't doing wasn't right, and so for a long time, for many many years, and so I knew that we had to come out and make a difference and stand up against what they continue to do, because we continue to lose people in our community, and people in our community also continue to lose things. And so they went, how do I feel about when the DOJ came? At first, I remember I thought maybe for a second there might be a little bit of a change. And then as the process has went on, things have continued to happen while they were here in town, even before anything has been settled or whatever. And so it's really hard for me to wrap my head around that things are actually going to change here. So that's why I do what I do.
So, welcome, Summer. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, can you share with us when you started protesting in 2020?
So I started protesting. We actually had done right before we went down in May. We had done a couple caravans. I was already planning to do. I was working with a lot of families with police brutality, loved ones that had been killed by the police. So I was doing a caravan with that. Being that I was Breonna Taylor's neighbor, I knew that that had happened with her. So I also asked if I could add her with us. So we did that, and then me and another young lady did another caravan through the city, and then we went downtown.
Okay. And so, what led you downtown? What made you say, I'm going downtown?
Well, unfortunately, being there that night, I knew that things were not right. I knew from the moment everything happened, things were way off. This was not the way things should have been done. And when the cop said to me, "A drug dealing girl shot at the police,"
Oh.
I said, "Nah," you know what I mean? Because like you know your neighborhood, right? And I knew
Hmm.
that wasn't right at all. And so it took a little bit to kind of figure things out because even as a neighbor, no one really knew what was going on because they made it really hard. So once we finally figured things out and we were like, okay, we got to get start doing some organizing. We got to, and it just, I knew from really honestly the night it all happened that I was going to do something, but it wasn't until we collaborated and organized that we did.
Okay. So, when you think back to 2020, is there any moment in particular that really stands out for you?
When, I'm sorry, it brings me tears every time. When the AG told us that we weren't going to get justice, that
And you're
really,
talking about Daniel Cameron.
Daniel Cameron,
Hmm.
yes. When he came over and said that we weren't going to get justice, it really broke my heart. And I knew that LMPD was up to the same old, you know. And because we had a little sense of hope. And at that time, actually, I was sitting on a council in Frankfurt for victims of violent crimes, being that I'm a human trafficking survivor. And what we were doing in Frankfurt was trying to get people to understand what, just everything with violent crimes, the trauma of it. We worked on many different things. That next day, I resigned
Hmm.
because I felt like if he could not represent and get justice for her, then he can't represent and get justice for any of us of victims of violent crimes. So I resigned that day off the council.
Okay. That was a bold move.
It was a very bold move,
Yes.
but it was the right thing to do.
Understandable. So you and many other folks um, applied pressure to the U.S. Department of Justice to come and investigate Louisville, not only off of what was happening in 2020, but a history of unjust policing.
Right.
So how did you feel on March 23rd, 2023, when U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland announced that they were going to be investigating the Louisville Metro Police Department?
I had some hope at first. I was like, okay, wait a minute, they're listening. You know what I mean? Like finally they are realizing what we've been telling them enough to come check it out. I went to a bunch of meetings. I did all the, and I was pretty excited at first.
That's interesting. You say at first we may get into that a little bit
Yes.
deeper, but then a
Hmm.
year later, the
Yep.
Department of Justice announced its findings. So, what did your protest look like after the Department of Justice finished its investigation and announced its findings?
Well, after we all screamed, "I told you so," right? I have to make sure we throw that in because this is, again, like you said, this isn't just 2020. Louisville has a generations of this kind of things happening, right? So for many, many, many years, people have been screaming that things are not right, and I think a lot of people felt like if they only would have listened, but we wouldn't be here today. But I'm glad they listened, and here we are. And so, how do I feel about it now?
Yeah, now we have a consent decree. So how do you feel about it?
It's hard for me. Okay, I want to be hopeful. At first, I was. I have lost that a little bit. I haven't lost hope in the people in our community because I see, but for that, it's hard for me doing what I do. So I do a lot of work in the anti-human trafficking and stuff like that for victims. And so when you have police officers that are on TikTok naked, detectives, when you have officers that are, police, killing people still, things are still happening. Why this stuff is going on? Why they are here? This is going on. Um, Victims aren't getting help. People are still being hurt. Homeless people are still being hurt. And so it's like, okay, so if they're doing all this while you're here, and you're telling me, well, now it's in a piece of paper and it can be in front of a judge, and it's hard. I'm trying to keep hope. What I am doing is I'm really involved in community. I'm really involved in us really like paying attention to each other and taking care of each other and really being that resource for each other because I can't wait for them to get their stuff together because victims are happening as we speak. You know what I mean? So I cannot wait for them to get it together. We're going to continue to do the things that we do. And then if things change, awesome. But we're going to keep doing what we do.
That's right. And I hope y'all heard Summer. She said we got to take care of one another. We have to
Yeah.
take care of ourselves. So I really do hope that you heard that. So when you think about this consent decree, Summer, what in this decree do you feel like really impacts your work, what you do, your advocacy, and ways in which you can hold LMPD accountable?
Well, obviously we know there's a lot of sexual misconduct in this thing, and so I'm going to definitely hold them their feet to the fire. Anything that I can possibly do when I see something that is wrong, and as much as the community as it took of us to interview and get them all here and tell them our story, we got to keep that same thing. Even though I'm frustrated at times, it doesn't stop me from doing the work. And it doesn't stop me from holding them accountable because then that would throw all of our work away. It's okay to get frustrated sometimes, people. It's okay. I think sometimes we got to keep a smile all the time, but so you hold them. So if you see things that they're not doing, they're talking about these complaints can be held in a court of law. Well, let's test their theory. I'm one for definitely testing a theory. So I'm excited. I have a lot of feelings around it. So I would suggest people just to continue to do the work. And same thing with our homeless stuff. Unfortunately, since all this has happened, and the Supreme Court has made everything homeless a criminal thing, and unfortunately, we've had a lot of homeless people targeted here recently, and it continues to happen. So I'm excited to see this stuff get in court because I'm gonna see what I can do to make sure those courts stay busy.
That's right, exactly. And you all may have seen this morning where Chief Humphreys with LMPD was interviewed on Wave 3, and he said that there was an error made when the woman who was pregnant was cited by LMPD for illegal homeless camping. She was pregnant and she was cited, so it made absolutely no sense.
He actually said it was a mistake.
Yes, yes.
And so I left a comment on his thing, a mistake. Are you going to fix this mistake? And what mistake? When she was embarrassed, when she was traumatized, she was in labor. She had a healthy baby later. And then the mayor says, what? She would have had a healthier baby if she'd have got help from us. Well, I wonder if he thought that when he just shut the emergency shelter down.
Mm, okay, there we go. So as we close out this interview, Summer, what are some words of encouragement that you have for folks as it relates to the consent decree?
I would say get educated on it. Get around to people that break it down. You know what I mean? Each person needs to read this. It's very important. We cannot talk about doing community and all this stuff if we don't understand this. So if you don't understand it, get with people that understand it. You know what I mean? And then get involved. Get it. We have to stay involved, as we always say, we are community, and so we have to hold them responsible. And so the DOJ says they're here. They're going to hold everybody. Let's make sure we put the feet to it. But mostly, if you have not read this, please, I'm begging you, print it off. Find somebody that can print it off for you. Hell, I'll print it off for you. please read it, get educated behind it, and educate all your friends, but everybody, because this is our community and this is the police, and unfortunately, it affects all of us.
That's absolutely right.
Fortunately, yeah,
Yeah,
unfortunately,
right.
I don't know which one.
Fortunately or
Right.
unfortunately. So, thank you so much, Summer, for your time today. Please stay safe in the snow, and we'll be back with our next guest.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey, hey, I know you're watching the live stream right now, but I want to take a moment to tell you to check out this new book right here over my shoulder. Believe me, it'll be worth it.
The lights of Kentucky Performing Arts shine on more than our shows. They illuminate a pathway of discovery for all throughout our Commonwealth. A pathway of creativity, confidence, possibility, of brilliance, inspiration, curiosity, and wonder. For 40 years, Kentucky Performing Arts has led a pathway to unite the Commonwealth around the joy of discovering the arts, and will continue to shine this light far into the future.
To those in our community who demanded change, thank you for speaking up.
To our community, thank you for your partnership as we move forward.
Well, we're going to be talking about the consent decree that was recently signed between Louisville Metro Government, the Louisville Metro Police Department, and the U.S. Department of Justice.
At the end of the day, the people of Louisville deserve constitutional and effective policing and nothing less.
Okay, Rhonda Mathis, community activist. How do I feel about the consent decree? That a lot of people are not going to read that document. However, it's important to people to know what's going on with that, because it is going to pertain to them and the community. So if you don't know, gather together with those who said they are reading it, like the Dove Coalition, who is fine going through it from line by line, and understand how it's going to impact you as a person and in your community. How do I feel with the DOJ being here? Is that I'm hopeful. I mean, we have had like study groups, people have given their input, but we're still not sure how it's going to play out, especially with the FOP want to intervene with the filing against the consent decree. So is this going to be a people's transparency, or are we going back to square one? Is that my?
All right, welcome back, y'all, and we are joined by the amazing Miss Rhonda Mathis. Miss Rhonda, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've got a few questions for you.
Okay.
You are one of our strongest activists in Louisville. My goodness. So, it's an honor to be here with you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I want to start by asking you, when did you first go out in the streets in 2020?
Oh, when I first got in the streets in 2020 was exactly May the 28th, when I saw what was going on TV, and I just went down to at that time in Justice Square.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
I did not expect anything less of you. So, what led you to go out to the streets?
What led me to go out to the street, because I've been out there since the late '80s when I was at Kentucky Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression chair. But back then, all of my comrades have really died. Maddie Jones is still around, but Reverend Coleman and Bob Douglas and Carmen Weathers and Braden and Tom, all of them are gone. Well, we was out there in the street and protesting the same thing with LMPD. I can remember James Teller was handcuffed, and they shot him. I remember Desmond Rudolph. The child was in a car, 20 bullets. He's already dead. Michael Newby shot in the back. Andre Reynolds, so Ann Reynolds' son, beat to death in Metro government in Metro jail. So those are flashbacks to me. And then you had this innocent black woman murdered in her home. I had no choice be part of the movement of the uprising, that this is too much going on. And still, we are not getting any resolution as far as police brutality. We all know it's systemic racism, and we knew it then, and we know it now.
Right. You are the definition of keep going. Harriet Tubman would be proud. So, Ms. Rhonda, can you say what was a moment during the protest that really stood out for you?
Well, the moment that really stood out for me and sort of uplifted me when everybody got together across the community, and I remember them in the streets, as far as just laying in the streets, and that just did something to me. That here we are. Can you imagine a massacre? Everybody dead because of what was happening, and it's at the hands of LMPD.
Mm. Wow, that's powerful. I would say one of the moments that stood out for me is when we were arrested together.
Oh,
Wow,
yeah, yeah.
that was something.
Yeah, it was something. And then what got to me, and it felt good, but Shamika, because she had heart condition, and I'm sitting up, they had me handcuffed and on the pavement, and she kept saying, "Well, let Miss Rhonda go. Let Miss." I said, "No, we are together. We are unity. And anybody go to jail, we all go to jail." And it was trumped up charges because we were not even near where they was talking about, and just inches away from sanctuary. So they was targeting us. They said they had caught a coup. You, Shamika, all of us together. And when they rounded it up, they was even laughing about it. So, that's just their mindset.
That's right. You're right. So you and a lot of other folks were applying pressure to the U.S. Department of Justice to come into Louisville and investigate LMPD. In part, your experience, you just talked about the decades of experience of seeing their abuse. So when on March 23rd of 2023, when U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland announced that the DOJ would be investigating LMPD, how'd you feel?
Well, I felt hopeful, finally that somebody is hearing the voices and understand that the data that they're collecting, we felt the data. We didn't have to collect anything. We are the data. So, and then having the circles of people that we had the round tables and giving the information. But what is sort of still frustrating because we don't have the people's consent decree on the table. So they keep talking about transparency, but are they truly trying to have transparency for the community, for the people to be involved in this?
That's right. Absolutely. So a year later, the Department of Justice announced their findings. What did your protest look like after that was announced?
After that was announced, after they found they findings, they said, yeah, like, hoorah, we already knew what you already telling us. So where do we go from here?
That's right. Exactly. So now we have the consent decree. So what are your thoughts about the consent decree?
Well, I'm glad it was signed before Trump's inauguration,
Yes.
but then it's still a lot of ambiguity with the consent decree. If you read some of it, should, could, how is it going to apply to in state of accountability? So that's where I stand with that. Are we going to get accountability with that? Because it's still protocol, and now we have the FOP is filing. So it's all of these different parts. So we sort of up in the air about it.
Well, and that makes sense. And for those of you who may not be aware, Ms. Rhonda is referring to the fact that this upcoming Monday, the 13th, LMPD will actually be in court because they have filed a motion to intervene with the consent decree. So, Ms. Rhonda, the consent decree is here. So, what does your advocacy look like now as it relates to the consent decree?
Well, my advocacy looks like now is letting people who are not involved, who are not paying attention, to pay attention. And then to get involved with groups like Dove, and then y'all are having something on it's the 18th to come to 101 groups that you're gonna have some powerful women dissecting what we've been talking about. So it's still all hands on deck.
That's right. Absolutely. Wow. In honor of Travis.
Again,
all hands on
yes,
deck. That's
yes.
right. So my last question to you, Ms. Rhonda, before we go is what words do you have for activists, protesters, leaders who are out there and they're unsure of what they can do now that there's a consent decree? What words of encouragement or advice do you have for them?
Well, I guess I quote in Travis' words, keep going. We just have to keep going, and we have to surround ourselves and strengthen ourselves, and then comrades coming together as far as we are determined that there's going to be a positive outcome for us as a people.
Yes. Thank you for that, Ms. Rhonda.
Thank
you
you.
for your time. Please
Thank
stay
you.
safe in the snow.
Thank you. You too.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Stay tuned for our next guest.
Hey, I know you're watching the live stream right now, but I want to take a moment to tell you to check out this new book right here over my shoulder. Believe me, it'll be worth it.
Hey guys, before we get back to the live stream, I'm Tracy, the bartender at Southern Hospitality Bar and Grill, located at 3402 West Broadway. You guys got to come and check us out. You can call your order in, and the phone number is 502-822-1474. Again, I'm Tracy, the bartender at Southern Hospitality. Come check us out, guys.
To those in our community who demanded change, thank you for speaking up.
To our community, thank you for your partnership as we move forward.
Well, we're going to be talking about the consent decree that was recently signed between Louisville Metro Government, the Louisville Metro Police Department, and the U.S. Department of Justice.
At the end of the day, the people of Louisville deserve constitutional and effective policing and nothing less.
Hello, my name is Melvin Boyd, community activist in Louisville, Kentucky. My feelings about the consent decree is I feel like it's a necessary thing to have for Louisville, Kentucky with the police department. Do I feel like change is going to come only if they are truly held accountable?
All right, y'all, welcome back. And now we are joined by Melvin Boyd, who is going to share with us about his experiences protesting in 2020, but also his work leading up to the consent decree and where we are today. So, Melvin, when did you first go out to the streets in 2020?
First time I went out to the streets was on May 28th, 2020, the first day of protest, and I went out and joined with the masses that night to protest.
Okay, awesome. And so, what led you out to the streets?
What led me out there was I was, started paying attention when Trayvon Martin happened, of course. So I started paying attention, seeing what's going on, and of course there were other events. So that's what really piqued me. And then when Michael Brown happened, I got upset, and I wanted to go to Ferguson in St. Louis, but I was still kind of nervous and probably a little scared to go. But I kept telling myself, like, if anything was to happen a little closer, I would go, never thinking it would. But I was like, man, if something happened close, I'm going out there because I was frustrated by what I saw with the attorneys and police when they came out and do press conferences. So when Breonna Taylor happened here, I immediately went out there. And honestly, on May 28th, I didn't even know who she was. I didn't know her name or anything. I just knew watching the live streamers that the police had killed somebody unarmed in Louisville. So I just got up and came out into the streets that night.
Wow, thank you for that. And thank you for reminding us about the live streamers, right? The 502 live streamers during the protests really were our media. They were our advocates. They were our voices sharing back the
Yes.
stories to people who couldn't be there for whatever reason, right?
Shout
So,
out to Maxwell Mitchell
yes.
and Milky Mist. Those are the first two I saw.
Okay, awesome. Um, so can you share a moment during the protest that really stands out for you?
Oh yes. There's so many, of course. We were out there for so long, but one moment that I always think is memorial to me is, or memorable to me, rather, the day of the verdict. Many of us went down to the square because we got the news that they were going to now have the verdict of the officers that were involved in the shooting of Breonna Taylor. And that day, after the verdict came forth, of course, we were all in shambles. Emotions were everywhere. We started marching. And I remember that day, that march, in comparison to others, it seemed to not be any quarrel about the march. It wasn't no which way we gonna go. People were already crying and screaming. I mean, I just remember it went dead silent after the verdict, like just eerie silent, and then people just started hollering, and then somebody just started screaming, "Let's march!" And we marched. And along the way in that march, we knew the police were gearing up in front of us and different things. And some of the men said we need to step in and make sure we're protecting the ladies and the young people. So a group of men, some I knew and some I didn't know, we locked arms in the front of that march and started walking. Um, it was just something we did just in the moment. I don't think we thought about the impact of it. I don't think we thought about nothing. It was just in that moment, like, hey, we need to lock arms and like keep everybody focused and go this way. I saw that image later captured on ABC News when they did a story, and just seeing in that moment was so touching because it was like, wow, seeing those men line up, along with myself, it's just such an impact in that moment.
And it was powerful. Wow.
Yes.
So, can you talk some about how your faith has guided you in this movement work? And I ask as a woman of faith, it's always
Yes,
to me a conversation that we in our justice work we tend to overlook, but it's so
yes,
important to have.
yes. So for me, it was unique for myself. I feel like I was a avid church person, church goer, church kid. Um, and a lot of people in church were kind of against it as far as where I come from. I'm Pentecostal, so it's the through history, most of the time the social justice and that fight has been more with the Baptists and some of those others. It hasn't been a lot of Pentecostals been involved. So I was already a minority in that aspect, but a lot of people did not gravitate to the idea of me being out there protesting. A lot of them didn't want me to protest, but I
Mm.
felt that this could have happened to anyone that I knew, and it still can. But like it could have been my sister, aunt, or another lady that I knew just growing up, and I wasn't gonna not go out here because it was wrong. And as far as our faith and what we're taught in church about right and wrong, I knew I was standing up for what was right by others doing wrong. So I was like, I'm gonna stay out here. It was a lot of pressure, a lot of triggering things that you saw, emotional things that we dealt with, a lot of things that we took in on a daily basis. It's one thing to face something periodically in life, and even frequent sometimes that we say, oh, every couple of months this happens, but to see something happening every day to people that you care about and it's emotionally tolling, my faith in God is what helped me.
Mm.
So being able to have that, because I do fear that if I didn't have that, I might have fallen into doing drugs and some other things, but I never did because I had God keeping me, and I was praying all the time. I was still, involved in my church, and things of that nature. But if it wasn't for God, because like I said, seeing that stuff on a daily basis takes a huge toll on a person emotionally, and I'm so thankful to have that faith to keep me grounded.
Amen. And to Melva's point about the emotional toil, I want to also give a shout out to Therapists for Protester Justice because they were out there in those streets at the
Yes,
square for and with people who needed them in those moments. And those moments were every day, y'all,
yes,
literally every day for more than 100 days. So thank you to them as well. So you, like a lot of folks, were applying pressure to the U.S. Department of Justice to come in and investigate Louisville Metro Police Department and Louisville Metro government. So how did you feel on March 23rd of 2023 when Attorney General Merrick Garland announced that they would be investigating the police department in the city?
um. So on that day, the announcement made me feel like some justice was going to be done, because I felt like, okay, we've gotten the attention of the nation and the world at this point by protesting. People were saying Brown Taylor's name all over. Now that the federal government's eye is turned on Louisville, Kentucky, I felt like, okay, some justice is going to be had. They're going to come in here. They're not going to be able to get away with this. So my feeling at that moment was, okay, something's going to be done now that the DOJ is going to come in.
Okay. All right. So then a year later, they announced their findings. And so what did your advocacy look like at that point?
So a year later, I began to learn about their role in investigating the LMPD, which was them looking into some of the civil misconduct that they had, not the criminal. And far as what I thought in the beginning, I thought they were doing the criminal. So it was a learning piece for me, education, which I think is very important in these matters. So my advocacy has definitely came through educate myself and helping educate others with other groups that I work with. And it comes from still being involved, showing up in community meetings, letting my voice be heard, because a lot of times they don't expect us to show up. So that's a way for them to kind of get things to skate by without us paying attention. So being in those spaces, learning about it, showing up, getting other people involved, encouraging them, educating them as well as a part of the advocacy process at this point, which for a long time we learned was moving from protest to policy.
And I will say that I see you everywhere. So you are absolutely continuing to show up. So now that the consent decree is here, how do you see yourself moving forward with justice and the consent decree? Like, how does that look for you?
Well, first things first, I'm taking my time and my due diligence to read over the consent decree page by page. So I'm going page by page, taking notes, forming questions for myself, and reading all of it. I'm not just relying on someone else. And there are other groups out there that are doing the research and providing, bullet points for people, but I'm taking that time to educate myself on it, read all the way through it. attending the meetings that the DOJ has and other community partners are having about the consent decree and learning what I can do and just moving forward, being involved in the process. If the consent decree spells out that the community is supposed to be involved and trying to help change and reform the LMPD, so I want to be a part of that and educate and encourage others to do so. So that's where my advocacy lies now, building the bridge with LMPD, which I believe is going to be hard, not just for myself, but for others because of what we've endured, what we've saw, the history of it. It's kind of hard to build that bridge, but we have to because, it's necessary right now. And I believe I can be vital in that process, but, it's going to be strategic and it's going to take time to do that because it's been a long time in getting us where we are now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for
Yes,
joining
ma'am.
us today, Melvin. Please stay safe in the snow, whatever you do,
Absolutely.
and
You
have
too.
an amazing weekend.
Thank you.
All right. So thanks to y'all for tuning in. As always, in the words of Harriet Tubman, keep going. We hear that often. Keep going. We heard it from Miss Rhonda. We've heard it from Dr. King. We heard it from Travis. Keep going because 2025 is the year for you to own your power and use your voice. And whatever you do, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay live.
To those in our community who demanded change, thank you for speaking up.
To our community, thank you for your partnership as we move forward.
Where we're going to be talking about the consent decree that was recently signed between Louisville Metro Government, the Louisville Metro Police Department, and the U.S. Department of Justice.
At the end of the day, the people of Louisville deserve constitutional and effective policing and nothing less.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
We will not make excuses. We will make changes.
It is our duty. It is our duty to. We must love and support. We must love.
Does the mayor still plan to spend this money in the same way following this announcement? And if so, why does he think he has the authority?
We have nothing to lose.
I've been here every day.
We have nothing to lose but our chance. But our chance.